Hi there. Hello,
Hey,
everybody.
everybody.
Whew, there's that moment where you think that no one's coming to the party and you get real sad, but it does mean you get to eat all the cake. So, you know.
I was just gonna say it'll just be me and Scott and a bowl of chips.
Oh my gosh. Welcome, everybody, to another edition. We're already off to a great start of the Virtuous Insider. So glad you guys could come join us today. Oh man, everybody's coming in, getting a seat. This is fantastic. This is
Hey.
our strategies in action session, and this is one I always really like. What when we do this the week after the Responsive Nonprofit Summit, it's always really exciting. And I want to get to all the good stuff. So real quickly, we always have some housekeeping items to chat about. Right. First off, we are recording the session today. We do that for all of these sessions. We will make it available in the support center afterward. That way, if you want, you can put it on the big screen in your office. Everybody can get some chips and popcorn and you can enjoy. We do have everybody muted. That way, hopefully we can get some good audio. We've had some audio adventures on past episodes and we recognize that. And if you have a question, please go ahead and send it in. We are, we're great with questions. We love questions. Last session was nothing but questions. And while you'll see us in the chat hanging out, if you have a question, please use that Q&A box. That way we won't lose track of it. And we can make sure that we can answer it for you during the session. Of course, as I say it's because I do have, and we are so excited to have Megan Donahue back on The Insider, a regular co-host, contributor, guest, artist extraordinaire. How you doing, Megan?
Hey, Scott. I'm doing great. I'm glad to be with you all today.
This is awesome. Megan's like our in-house celebrity, the host of the Responsive Weekly. So she comes and joins us on The Insider. We get all giggly. And look, your fans are even saying hi. See, they
Hi,
follow
everybody.
you wherever you go. And so for today's agenda, what we want to do coming out of, again, the Responsive Summit is Megan's going to help share some of the key takeaways. It was 3 days, tons of sessions, a lot of learning, hopefully, that happened over the summit. We could do this for like an hour and a half, but we're going to distill it down to 3 of the things that really stood out over the course of those 3 days. And then we'll take a look at some of those things and how you can actually apply them in Virtuous. Because again, it's always great to be excited and jazzed about learning all this great stuff. But when you leave this session and you think, well, what do I do? How do I start? How can I do that for my organization? We want to start to look at some things to help you jumpstart that. And then again, as always, if you have questions, you can ask us and we promise to be friendly and we will answer those. But I will turn it over to Megan to tell us a little bit about what she really kind of saw as some key highlights from the summit.
Absolutely. So there are a ton, and narrowing it down to 3 just to talk about in our half hour today was very difficult. So I'm not saying these are the be all and end all takeaways from the summit. You will have your own, but some good things for us to chat about. And if you missed it, if there were sessions you wanted to catch but couldn't quite make live, all of the videos are up at virtuous.org/summit/archive. So check those out.
Megan beat me.
It's a good way to revisit stuff, share
about to
stuff.
drop that in the chat for you, and then you were just on it like a professional.
Have it ready to go. Yeah, so there was a lot. It was great. And I think you're right, Scott. Like, it's really easy. I've been calling it conference brain, this thing that happens where it's like, wow, that was 3 days of content just like coming in through my eyeballs. And it's a lot. And it's really easy to, one, get overwhelmed and think, oh, I have to change everything about everything I'm doing. Oh, no. Or just kind of be dizzied by the whole thing and be like, I learned some stuff. I know I did. Lots of stuff I learned. So reviewing is an important part of actually making sure we have takeaways from big learning experiences. So I'm glad we're having opportunities to do that. So some of the stuff we got into, there's one point that I'm calling major gift conversations, but I think we could call it donor conversations because it came up in 2 places at least. One was Gail Perry's session, which was, it's not an ask, it's a major gift, or it's a giving conversation. I believe her keynote was called. And then Chris Barlow did a quick bold talk, I think the ones that are like 12 minutes, on just asking donors questions. And both of those, I think, were a really good reminder that we spend a lot of time thinking about what do donors want? What do donors care about? How do we aim our communications to their interests as responsive fundraisers? And we can ask them. We don't have to guess. We can actually ask. So that was a great reminder of that there are, conversations to be had, whether you're having those in a major gift conversation scenario, which is a one-on-one actual conversation, or those broader scaled conversations, which are things like survey results, asking questions on your giving confirmation page that pops up after someone has made a gift, asking, why did you give today? Why did you take that action you just took? What more can we learn about you? Throwing opportunities to converse into your new donor welcome series, things like that. One of the things I really liked, and anyone who feels at all intimidated by major gift conversations, which I'm sure is no one, I'm sure it's just me. Everyone else feels totally cool asking people to give them $10,000.
Everybody digs it. Yes.
Yeah, we all love it and feel super confident all the time. I really recommend Gail Perry's session because she humanizes the process. She gives very concrete strategies for making it an actual conversation that centers donors on their passions and on the difference they want to make in the world, that kind of just gently leads them to the gift by really focusing on impact. That's a great session. I would encourage everyone to check out if they're looking to have more authentic major gift conversations and build stronger relationships with donors. But then I think that also can scale to all of your donors. That's our whole responsive fundraising ethos, with things like surveys and other kinds of donor conversations for listening.
Well, look at the responsive framework, right? The responsive framework is listen, connect, suggest, repeat. And we talk about that as the framework that you want to apply to all of your comms. But I mean, what you're talking about really fits into that same framework here, because that is having a good conversation. You can't go into a conversation thinking, what's the next thing I'm going to say? What's the next thing I'm going to say? I have to listen to you as the major donor, whoever I'm talking to. I want to make that connection. And then it's not an ask, right? I'm suggesting the logical next step. Hey, you've told me that children's literacy is near and dear to your heart, and you want to make sure that the next generation has access to all the help they need to be able to read. I'm going to suggest that a $25,000 gift could go a long way towards making that happen. Very different framework, and it fits right into everything we talk about in terms of being responsive.
Absolutely. And the thing I love too is Gail makes it really clear in a major gift context, but again, across the board with responsive fundraising, of asking questions and asking for permission of, do you want to hear more about this? Do you want to learn about different ways you could be involved? And taking it from there, instead of like, I've got it on my list, I need to ask this person for $25,000. Like, that's what I need to do in this conversation. Instead of finding like, how do you want to be involved? Then you can start with, from that listening, making suggestions that are real. I mean, because maybe, okay, we have that donor who's interested in children's literacy, but maybe what they're telling me is, I really care about kids and I don't have any in my life. And I wish I interacted with kids more. Then what I might want to say is like, oh, you should become one of our read aloud readers.
Perfect.
And that builds an actual relationship based on what they actually said. Am I still thinking about where that's going to go in a donor relationship? Sure, but it's about meaningful connection for every donor. So I think that was a really interesting session. And then Chris Barlow's questions session as a companion to that, to see like, how can we start getting that to every donor? I would encourage people to check out.
100%. I love that. And I think we have this tendency to assume that we have to infer a lot of things based on what someone gives to, or doing, data appends, wealth appends, and all this prospect research, when really coming out and just saying to the donor, hey, what are you passionate about? What do you want to make happen? And what would you like this relationship with our organization to look like? What is it that you're interested in making happen? Not enough people do that. I really believe that. And if we did, we can still do data pens, we can still do wealth pens, we can still do all those cool things, but just go ahead and ask them, because it does two things. It gets you the information and it shows the donor that you're interested.
Absolutely. Well, we could spend the whole time talking about this.
Yes, I know.
But I did have a couple other takeaways.
We got to move. We got to go. It's quick 30 minutes, people.
It goes so fast every time.
So what is your next piece of knowledge that you want to drop on us?
The next thing that really was communicated across the summit in various ways is that responsiveness is a team effort. That we talk about being a responsive fundraiser, but really what you want is to be a responsive nonprofit. And that makes it that responsiveness is everybody's job. That sounds easier than it is in practice, because we do have, we had a lot of conversations about issues with silos, about how do you empower teams to work together more effectively? How do you put more attention where it makes the most impact instead of spending time being fragmented or fractured or spending all your time on admin or any number of things. So we talked a lot about responsive teams and what it might look like to be working together in a responsive way as an organization. One of the sessions that was good was Noah Barnett did a keynote on responsive teams. And the end of day one, definitely worth checking out. He identified 8 responsive mindsets, so lots to dig in there. I thought that was really interesting. And we also looked at ways that you can actually start using your tech stack to break down some of those problems, like spending everyone's precious, valuable time that they could be spending in other ways on tedious back office stuff, or just not having cross-team cooperation of how you're sharing data and information. So there was a lot there about ways to start working together better. I mean, the whole conference theme was building better, and building better teams is a big part of that.
100%. And I'll say it's something that's in our DNA as a company and in our application, right? As a product, is to make the data open and available to everybody on the team. We want everybody to be on the same page and have everybody, whatever the metaphor is you want to use, everybody rowing in the same direction, everybody singing from the same sheet music. You can take your pick. But the more that data is open and shared within the organization, then the easier it is to achieve that. And the other thing is you really want to pull, I think, everybody much closer to the mission and to the donors and to the work, especially the folks who are doing back office admin stuff and can feel very, very separated from all of that. There's one organization that does something great, which is that once a month, everybody in the organization makes donor thank you calls. And so it doesn't matter if your job is just data entry, if you're someone coming and doing filing, it doesn't matter if you're doing program work, everybody makes donor thank you calls. And that goes a long way towards making the donors feel a lot more connected. And it also helps the team all feel a lot more connected to those donors and to the work that's going on. It seems like a really small thing, but it makes a huge difference to be able to do stuff like that.
That's great. And there was a thing that was not the main point in the mental health panel, but something that I hadn't thought about that I thought was really interesting, was they said that in this remote environment that a lot of people are working in, if you're not directly program staff, it's not uncommon to only hear the bad news or the problems that get escalated to management or things like that, so that you have you're separated from that day-to-day operations thing, and the stuff you are getting is the hardest to deal with. And that seems like a good strategy for just making sure we're having positive mission focused experiences across the board, no matter what your job is, no matter where you are.
Yes. And you have to get the team not only closer to the donors, but also closer to the mission, because, and I say this all the time, folks work in nonprofit because they're mission driven people, right? This isn't something that you get into because you're really interested in data necessarily. Maybe that's something that you do have sort of a passion for, but you start doing it because you believe in the mission, right? You believe in the cause. And it gets hard at a certain point when you get stuck in the muck. Like you said, you're dealing with escalations and upset people and drama and problems with getting stuff to the field. And oh my gosh, but to get back to the work that's being done, to say, hey, look, every month we are a children's literacy org, and every month, folks are going to spend at least an hour being one of the read-along partners. so that you get to kind of refresh your spirit and remember, well, why am I here in the first place? Right? That kind of stuff is really valuable.
Yeah. And it seems like at first glance that the like data conversation and the like warm fuzzy conversation are separate. But all of it comes together of like breaking down silos, working together better, and reconnecting to the mission. These are all incredibly important for the culture of your organization. So it's not just like we make things better by reconnecting with the mission and that's it. Because if you only reconnect with the mission and never solve your siloing and working together problems, you're still going to be stressed out. So pulling it all together into one piece where like our team is working better, we are connecting everyone to the mission. This is the ideal state.
Yes.
Just, so easy. So everyone go do that. And our work here is done.
Example of like, great idea, go do it and everything's fixed.
Let us know how it goes. but those like, so when you are making those corrections or improvements to your communication as a team, your working systems, you are like, that's self-care and community care in a way for your organization, as much as connecting with your mission, I think.
Yes, I think providing clarity to the mission, to where you are, to the whole team, that is something. And not to perk my own pot, I was in the session that I led in the summit, we talked about joy, right? How do you does it spark joy, and sparking joy in your fundraising? And we talked about how that clarity of purpose and everything, that does bring a certain amount of joy to your team, because it does stress you out when you don't know how well you're performing, and you don't know necessarily what everybody's doing or what you're supposed to do next. That raises your stress level right off the bat.
Absolutely.
All right. So I know you've got one more for us, Megan,
yeah,
and then we promised we'll show some stuff in Virtuous, because that's nominally what we do here.
Indeed.
But what was the other key takeaway that stood out to you?
Yeah, we kind of touched on it already a bit. Digital transformation requires usable data. So there was a great discussion on digital transformation on the first day of the summit, where two nonprofit leaders just talked about how they're approaching this whole topic of digital transformation and what that even means, and if that's even the way we should talk about it. But there was a lot of good practical advice in that session. So if you missed it, I'd recommend you check it out. But I was really struck by how important usable data really is. And that's not to discourage anyone if you're still working through yours and cleaning up and improving your hygiene. That's to encourage you that it's important and you should keep doing it. There's never going to be a day of like, we've reached perfect data cleanliness and everything is now forever set in stone. We'll never have another problem. That's not how life works. But getting your data into a shape where you can access it, it works for you. That's just necessary if you're going to try to do anything to be informed by your data, to use your data to communicate, and to adopt a digital first approach.
Yes. And this is something that I say a lot, actually, which is data. We talk about data, big data, all the data, fundraising data. We talk about data all the time. But at the end of the day, data is like bananas. Good for you, but you can't just let them sit, because they're going to go bad. Right. If they're on my counter for 6 months, like I got to get rid of those things. When they start to brown, you got to make some banana bread or do something. Right. So no one's questioning whether or not bananas are healthy for you or good for you, but they don't last. And data is the same way. It's inherently going to go bad over time. So like Megan said, there's no point where you have reached the ideal state where your data is perfect, but there are a lot of things you can do to try to keep your data in a good place and know, hey, we're going to make sure that we're addressing this on a rolling basis, right? Making it part of the process. In that same Sparking Joy session, we talked about doing data audits and building that into your annual process, and then even doing some more frequent checks. And we've got data health tools, of course, everybody knows, to help you do some of that stuff, to keep your data up to date, because you need to trust your data if you want it to work for you. If I want to do all the sexy automation stuff, I've got to be able to trust that my data is accurate, so I can let it go do, like Megan said, the boring stuff or the tedious stuff, and I can go do the more exciting stuff.
Absolutely.
100%. Well, hey, I know we're pretty, man, boy, my sense of time is already bad. But let's look at a couple things that we can highlight for some of these things in Virtuous, just real quickly here. And when we talk about our major gift conversations, there's two things that I want to highlight here in terms of that. Number one is for everybody, right? And this also goes into the fact that everything is a team effort. We talk about having clean data, up-to-date data, and everything else. It's everybody's job to keep the database up to date. And that means, it doesn't mean doing all kind of crazy complex stuff. It means things like, hey, if I had a major donor conversation, I'm going to log the notes from that conversation in a timely fashion and make sure that I'm keeping things up to date. And so here, let's say, man, I got so many widgets anymore. It's getting out of hand here. But we'll go to our friend, Tony Stark. We use him a lot because he's right on my dashboard, obviously, and he's also Iron Man. So why wouldn't we? But I want to make sure that I'm using tasks and I'm using notes effectively as a gift officer, and make sure that I'm logging all of my interactions, right? And so logging a task, really easy. Call Tony, and follow up on the ask, whatever that ask might be. I can assign that to myself, and I can create that task. Then if I want to really make sure I'm staying on top of this, I can come in here and edit this. Maybe I've reached out to Tony a couple of times and I can't get a hold of him. So I can say, hey, look, this is in progress. It's not something that I haven't even looked at. I can't get him ear to ear yet to have a conversation with him, right? I can do those sorts of things for these tasks. And remember, you can keep track of tasks on your task board, so you can see what's in progress, what things are you working on. But then when I complete a task, and this is something that Virtuous pushes you to do automatically, right? The minute I check that little check mark to say, hey, this was completed, Virtuous is going to tell me, hey, you should be creating a contact note. It's not enough to say, I called Tony. I called him, and what happened? What did we talk about? What questions did I ask? What was the outcome of the conversation? Because later on, this is information I'm going to want to use to inform my other conversations with him, right? If he told me he's really passionate about working with kids, even though he said he's interested in children's literacy, like to Megan's point, I want to make sure that I mention he should be a volunteer. I want to capture that here because a month from now, I might forget why I said he should volunteer when clearly he also has gobs of money laying around. But I can come in here and log that, and I can log my notes. Now, you've got some note types that are built into the system, and then you have the ability to create your own custom note types, brief eye contact, not built into the system. And so anytime you have something like this, a major donor, major gift conversation, create a custom note type for that. It makes it very easy for you to look at metrics and see how many of these conversations you're having. Very difficult to do if I'm just saying this is in person. In person could mean a wide range of things. If later on I want to know not just how many face-to-face interactions did we have, but how many of these major donor focused conversations did we have, create a note type for it. It's going to be way easier for you to keep track of that, right? Met Tony for lunch. He will sponsor us. I don't know.
And this is great for working across teams too, because if Scott makes that note and then I have a meeting, I know all the things.
Exactly.
So it isn't that Mr. Stark has to tell every single person at the organization individually that he doesn't want to have a meeting after 6 p.m. or any number of things.
100%. It's part of all three of the things that you mentioned, really, right? It's having that conversation. It's making sure that I'm keeping my data up to date, and it is a team effort. It's making sure that I'm not just keeping this stuff in my own little Excel spreadsheet or my own Evernote document. It's all going into Virtuous so everybody knows, hey, what's the latest going on with this particular donor? Because then if he calls in, right, every interaction with that major donor is vital. So he calls in and he gets to the front desk. Someone there should know who he is, what his deal is, and they should know that he's a major donor, and they should be able to see that information on his record, right? They should be able to pull him up and look at the tags see his life to day giving and know, oh my gosh, I'm having an interaction with someone who's like one of our biggest donors. Not that they're not going to treat everybody well, but we know everyone's going to step up their game a little bit. So, it really does address all three of these different factors that we talked about. Now, the other two things that I wanted to just touch on real quickly that kind of dovetail into these things. So in terms of the team effort, like I said, part of our DNA is to make data available to everybody on the team. Now, we know that there are some reasons and different needs in terms of permissions. So we have a lot of very robust user permissions that you can build. But when you build in user permissions, one thing I want everybody to remember, so I'm speaking to all of you admins out there, right, as we talk about this right now. Let's say that I don't know what this particular one was, but for any of these different objects here, so especially if we're talking about gifts, remember that there's a difference between what someone can see and what someone can edit. It makes sense that I don't want a lot of people on my team going in and monkeying around with gift data. Gosh, no, I've got a very focused group of people who do that. But that doesn't mean that I have to hide that data from other members of the team. I can give folks just read access to that data. That's true for gifts. It's true for planned gifts. It's true for pledges and recurring gifts and all of these different things. So we tend to think of permissions in terms of, hey, what do I want to hide from somebody? But it's also, hey, what do I just want to not let you mess around with, right? I'm totally fine with letting you access that data and then be able to take advantage of the ability to set up your dashboard widgets to see all that information. And of course, to clean data, like I mentioned, we've got our data health tools, which just got a little better in the most recent release, right? They got a lot cooler. So now when you come in here to work with your potential duplicates, you have the ability to filter over here. So I could say, hey, I just want to see all the most recent matches, right? So I can come in here and say, hey, show me everything where they were matched as potential dupes in the last 30 days, for example. Or I might want to do this based on match qualifier. Hey, I just want to tackle all the ones where the address is the same or all the ones where the phone number is the same. I want to prioritize these a little bit. And then if you do have a lot, if this is snowballed on you, you have the ability to come in here and download all of the records flagged as duplicates, and then even bulk merge records by uploading a CSV file. Okay, so that way you can go ahead and upload that and merge very quickly. Now that's kind of a blunt instrument tool, and you'll see some more information in the system that tells you more about that. You want to be careful how you use it, but if you've got some low-hanging fruit, it helps you really get ahead of the game a lot more quickly. Okay, I know we're pretty close to time. We've had a couple of questions come in, and I wanted to address these real quickly. So one was about being able to see how much money someone has in their account. So I know a lot of times we'll hear about this from, for example, missionary users, right? Or someone who's raising your own support, anyone who's in a deputized fundraising sort of model. You can see that information on your project. So if I go to a project in Virtuous, we got our little bookmark here to go into projects. For any one of my projects, I have a statement tab on here, and that can show me the most recent gifts and everything else. It'll also show me a balance, but this balance is something that's not calculated in Virtuous. It has to be populated via an API integration. So keep that in mind. And I see one other question asking about duplicates. Why does it indicate there's only one account? Shouldn't there be two at least? Well, there are. So here, the way this is laid out, and I'm glad you asked this question because this is a change. This is a little bit new here. Now we're going to show you how many contacts were flagged and then how many potential matches there were for those contacts. Here, everything's one-to-one, so it's kind of nice and tidy. And so for Peter and Mary Jane, there's only one duplicate identified. And if I click on the little caret here, it'll show me the duplicate. Here's the duplicate record. Let me go ahead and work on that or just ignore this pairing because I know they're not duplicates. So that's why I'm seeing that little one here. Some of these might have 2, 3, or 4 duplicates flagged. And you could see, for example, 4 contacts with 8 potential duplicates, something like that. So that's a great question. Okay. I know that we are pretty low on time here. Okay. So I do want to thank you guys all for joining us this week. This is pretty awesome. And oh my gosh, I'm behind on my slides, Megan. You'd think I'd know how to host a webinar by now, but obviously I don't. Jeez. I do want to remind you all, please do join us next week. We do this every Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern. And next edition is going to be our Product Pulse session. It'll be with Jason Van Loo, Director of Product. We'll be looking at all the cool stuff that we're cooking up in Virtuous for all of you. So that'll be next week. Come join us for that. And then because we're talking about all the learning that happened and everything that happened at the summit, and because I'm from Philadelphia, naturally, I have to go to Ben Franklin. But I wanted to pull this up, which is tell me and I forget, teach me and I remember, involve me and I learn. And I think that was one of the big themes that came out of the summit, like you said, in terms of building a responsive team, getting people involved, not just talking at people, but hey, let's collaborate and come together and learn some new things. That's really how folks are going to learn. So, Megan, let me ask you, any final words of wisdom that you want to share with everybody?
I feel like mine is always the same thing, which is there are, infinite things you could do to optimize your fundraising and millions upon millions of ways to improve everything you do. And you don't have to do them all at once. And it's okay if you can pick one and do it. Like this, don't try to boil the ocean. Don't try to, eat the whole thing in one bite. You can take little tiny bites and they make a difference. It really is still doing something if you don't do everything at once.
100%. And of course, I've got hot in my hands from Jason Van Loo himself, our traditional sign off, the Jason Van Loo dad joke of the week, which is Jason just wants me to share with everybody, whoever stole his copy of Microsoft Office, look out. He will find you. You have his word. Love him. All right. Thank you, Megan, so much. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And we will see you again next week. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.